Recently, okay, not recently, but this is when I'm getting to it, there was an account that gained a lot of attention on TikTok for posting some of the nicknames given to Japanese high school baseball players. One nickname that gained quite a bit of attention was that of Suguru Egawa, the enemy of the people. Funnily enough, as a guy who focuses a lot on NPB history, I know him by a different nickname, Dirty Egawa. Now, with nicknames like that, one has to wonder, just who was this guy? How did he become so hated? And how did his career go? Well, let's dive into that. Suguru Egawa was born in the city of Owaki in Fukushima Prefecture in 1955. His father, a mining engineer, moved the family to the town of Sakama in Shizuoka, which is now part of the largest city of Hamamatsu. Egawa's father was a massive baseball fan, especially of the Giants, and dreamed that one day one of his sons would suit up for the Kyojin. But he didn't think that would be Suguru. Instead, Suguru's older brother was thrust into the sport, with his father ensuring that he trained every day. Suguru, like most little brothers, wanted to do what his big brother was doing, and thus his father gave him a glove and a bat as well. It was pretty clear that Suguru was great at baseball, but his father wouldn't realize it until one summer's day when Suguru was still in elementary school. The Tenryu River is a major river that passes through western Shizuoka. As with any river, young men like to try and throw rocks across it. Why? I don't know. Neuron activation, I guess. Regardless, one day Suguru and his brother and his father were down by the river throwing rocks in, when Suguru musters all his strength and throws one all the way across the river. Now, any decently strong adult can do this no problem, but Suguru was in elementary school. Egawa would go to the river every chance he could and throw rocks across it to build up his shoulder, and in his first year of junior high, Egawa made Sakama Junior High's baseball team as a hard-throwing defensive outfielder. He was also pegged as an emergency pitcher should the team need one. Well, the team needed him to, and he shut out a rival junior high school in his first start on the mound, making the rotation. In his second year of junior high, the family moved again, this time to the city of Oyama in Tochigi. Egawa would immediately make the rotation of Oyama Junior High School and help them to the Tochigi Junior High tournament, pitching a no-hitter against Kurimoto Junior High and eventually winning the tournament. Naturally, this had every high school in the prefecture chomping at the bit to recruit him. Oyama High School obviously wanted him, but so did Nihon University's Tochigi High School. But Suguru had a dream. He wanted to pitch in the Soke-sen, the premier rivalry match of the Tokyo Big Six between Waseda and Keio universities. So he decided to attend Sakushin High School in Utsunomiya. Sakushin had direct relations with Keio University, and was both an elite academic and elite sporting school. Sakushin had pulled off the double and won both spring and summer Koshien in 1962, but hadn't made either tournament since 1964. Egawa was looking to change that. Sakushin initially threw him in their bullpen, but after throwing 7 Ks in relief against Ashio High School in the second round of the Tochigi tournament, he was penciled in to start against Ashikaga University High School. He went 8 strong innings, giving up only 3 hits before being lifted. In the quarterfinals against Karasuyama High School, he pitched a perfect game, the first in the history of Tochigi High School baseball. But alas, Sakushin was knocked out in the semis by their biggest rivals, Utsunomiya Commercial. In his second year of high school, Egawa would go from a regional star to a national sensation. In the second round of the Tochigi tournament, Egawa no-hit Otawara High, striking out 13. Then in the third round, he no-hit Ishibashi High, striking out 17. Then in the quarterfinals, he no-hit Tochigi Tech, striking out 17. Tochigi Tech had also managed to shut down Sakushin High's bats too, until Egawa walked off his own no-hitter. Now, after pitching 3 no-nos in a row, what do you think Sakushin did? That's right, chuck him back out there for the semis, because this is Japanese high school baseball, where moderation is a myth. The crazier thing is, it almost worked. Facing Oyama High, the school he had shunned in favor of Sakushin, Egawa pitched 9 2/3 no-hit innings, striking out 15. As evidenced by that line, Sakushin's bats couldn't get going. After giving up his first hit in 4 games in the 10th, Oyama would walk him off in the 11th, eliminating Sakushin. That gave Egawa the Japanese high school record of 36 2/3 consecutive no-hit innings, during which he struck out 62 batters. As you can imagine, this made national news. High schools from all over the country were inviting Sakushin to play them specifically so they could face Egawa, and Egawa would rise to the challenge each time, something he later regretted doing, as it really put a tax on his shoulder. But by now, the media were branding him as the Monster, the first in a long line of pitchers to get that nickname. When asked by the media what his goals were for his third and final year of high school, Egawa's response was blunt: Koshien. That was the only thing he had left to prove. It would be made easier for him too, as it was announced that for 1973, Summer Koshien was going from a 30-team tournament to a 48-team tournament. One school for every prefecture except for Hokkaido, which got 2. Instead of having to win the North Kanto tournament, Sakushin now only needed to win the Tochigi tournament. This was no small feat though, as fellow Tochigi school Ashikaga Tech had won the North Kanto tournament in 1972. In the fall Kanto tournament, Egawa would prove that he was ready for the big time. In the first round of the Tochigi preliminaries, he faced Nasu High, going 5 innings, striking out 14 of the 15 batters he faced. Then in the second round, he pitched a complete game shutout against Koshien rep Ashikaga Tech, giving up 2 hits and striking out 15. Then in the semis, he pitched 6 shutout innings against Utsunomiya High. And finally, in the Tochigi finals against Karasuyama, he pitched another complete game shutout, allowing 2 hits as Sakushin finally got over the hump. And now it was on to the best schools in Kanto. The first school Sakushin faced was Tokyo Agriculture University High School, the champions of Gunma. Yeah, it's confusing, I know. Egawa would strike out 13 in 6 innings of work, including 9 in a row. He then faced Choshi Commercial, the kings of Chiba High School baseball at the time, known for their devastating heart of the order. He one-hit them. In the finals, Egawa would face Kanagawa's champions, Yokohama High. Facing their first-year ace, future first-round pick Eishoku Nagakawa, he pitched another complete game shutout while going 3 for 3 at the plate. This earned Sakushin High an invitation to 1973 Spring Koshien. While not as prestigious as Summer Koshien, it was still Egawa's first chance to show off his stuff for a national audience. The media branded 1973 Spring Koshien as Egawa's tournament. And now, after reading about Egawa in the paper for months, this would be the first time anyone outside of Tochigi and the surrounding prefectures would even see him pitch. And on March 27, 1973, a capacity crowd of 55,000 swarmed into Koshien Stadium to watch Egawa and Sakushin High take on the local school, Hokuyo High, in the opening round. In the first, Hokuyo couldn't even make contact. Then in the second, future Kintetsu Buffaloes farmhand Fumio Arita clubbed a foul ball up the first base line, drawing probably the biggest round of applause he ever got in his life. Then Arita struck out on the next pitch. Hokuyo couldn't even put a ball in play until there were 2 outs in the 4th, that being the only hit of the game. In the end, Sakushin won 2-0, with Egawa racking up 19 strikeouts in his spring Koshien debut. Hokuyo's manager said after the game, "We were useless against him." Kitakyushu's Kokura Minami High School would be the next on the chopping block. Their manager had watched the first game from the stands, and resolved to try and do something just so his boys could make contact. As a result, Kokura Minami's batters entered their second round match with their bats choked all the way up and always ready to lay down a bunt. It kinda worked, as Egawa only struck out 10 that day in 7 innings of work. Still, Kokura Minami High School could only manage 1 hit. Sakushin won 8-0. Next up, Imbari Nishi High School, the champions of Ehime. Egawa pitched 6 perfect innings before finally allowing a hit in the 7th, striking out 14. After giving up said hit, he struck out the side in both the 8th and the 9th, finishing with a complete game shutout and 20 strikeouts. Now to the semis, where he'd face Hiroshima Commercial High School. Hiroshima Commercial was the first team he faced that actually carried a future NPB All-Star, as they enrolled future Hiroshima carp catcher Mitsuo Tatsukawa, who would go on to make 7 All-Star games, as well as pick up 3 Gold Gloves and 3 Best 9. Like the other managers before him, Hiroshima Commercial's skipper had been watching the previous games, but unlike others, he knew what to look for. He noticed that Egawa recorded most of his strikeouts with his powerful, high backspin rising fastball. He told his batters to lay off the high heat. It worked. While Hiroshima Commercial still barely got on base, when they did, they danced their asses off to try and break Egawa's concentration. That also worked. Egawa's catcher, future MP Yoshitani Kameoka, airmailed the throw to third on a double steal to allow 2 runs to score. Sakushin lost 2-1. Hiroshima Commercial's pitcher Masaki Sakuda would forever earn the nickname the man who stopped the monster. He would never play an inning of pro ball. Now that he'd gotten his first taste on the national stage, Egawa wanted to get back there, badly, and the nation wanted to see it. Egawa got off to a hot start by pitching 2 no-hitters in Sakushin's tune-up games, and it was on to the Tochigi tournament. First couple rounds of a prefectural high school baseball tournament are usually a pretty sparse affair. Usually just groups of students from both schools, some alumni, some scouts, maybe some people who just want to see some high school baseball. There was rarely more than a couple thousand people in the stands, and usually only a few hundred, if that. For Egawa's first start, in Sakushin's second round match against Mocha Tech, there were 20,000. Traffic in Utsunomiya was ground to a standstill. People came from Tokyo, Nagoya, hell even as far afield as Sendai to watch Egawa pitch. The softball field next door had to be turned into a temporary parking lot. The police had to be brought in to prevent gridlock. Egawa gave them a good show, no-hitting Mocha Tech. Then he no-hit Sakura Seishu High School in the third round. Then he only gave up 1 hit against Kanema Shoko High School in the quarterfinals. The day before the semifinal matchup against Koyama, 100 people camped out at the ticket booths. Egawa only gave up 1 hit. And in the finals against Utsunomiya Higashi High School, he threw a no-hitter, losing the perfect game due to an error from his defense. If you include the pre-tournament tune-up games, Egawa had not given up a run in 140 innings. He was truly a monster. Off to Koshin we go. Sakushin was drawn into a first-round match against Yanagawa High, the champions of Fukuoka Prefecture. Millions tuned in. It was such a spectacle that the Kansai Electric Power Company had to put out a notice asking the residents of Osaka, Kobe, and Kyoto to conserve power so the broadcast would not overload their generators. Office buildings were also instructed to turn off their escalators for this same reason. Yanagawa High came in as massive underdogs, but they had a plan. They saw how Hiroshima Commercial had beaten Egawa at Spring Koshin and resolved to do something similar. They were going to use what's called the buster method, when a batter shows bunt to bait a breaking ball, then pulls back and takes advantage of it. Despite this, Egawa struck out 10 of the first 15 batters he faced. Still, Yanagawa High was able to do what no school had done before. They scored. In the 6th, they tied the game at 1-1. This ended Egawa's runless streak at 145 innings. Yanagawa continued their craftiness. With the bases loaded and 1 out in the bottom of the 9th, they pulled in their center fielder to act as a 5th infielder, with him taking position in front of second base. They knew how weak Sakushin's hitting was, and they were not going to take any chances. It worked, the game went into extras. In the 12th, they did it again, and again, it worked. In the end, Sakushin finally broke through and walked off Yanagawa in the 15th. Egawa pitched all 15 innings, striking out 23. Sakushin's second round match was against Choshi Commercial, who Egawa had last faced in the 1972 Fall Kanto tournament. Egawa had 1 hit them in that game, but this time they'd be bringing a new guy to face him. Second-year starter Masakatsu Tsuchiya, a future first-round pick of the Trinichi Dragons. The two had a pitcher's duel for the ages. Through 12 innings, neither Sakushin nor Choshi had scratched a run across. By the 12th, it was chucking it down. Egawa's grip on the ball was heavily affected by the rain, but the tight scheduling of Koshin meant there was no way this was getting called off. With the bases loaded and a 3-0 count, Egawa walked in the winning run. It was over. All that was to look forward to was the 1973 NPB draft. Egawa was a no-brainer first-round pick, and the Hankyu Braves selected him 7th overall. But there was something they didn't know. Much later in life, Egawa stated that he had one sole dream: to pitch for the Giants. Failing that, he did not want to leave Kanto, and he did not want to play in the Pacific League. So anyone but the Giants, Swallows, and the Whales was a no-go. And even then, the Whales' facilities were so lackluster and the team was so bad that Egawa probably would have refused them anyhow. That is why, despite the Hankyu Braves having won 5 of the last 7 PL pennants and being the best team in the PL by a wide margin, Egawa said no. Instead, he took Keio University's entrance exams. He failed. It was headline news. At the time, there had already been several scandals erupting from universities taking bribes to admit people who'd failed their entrance exams, including Fukuoka Dental University that very year. So there was no way Egawa was going to be admitted on the quiet. Having not applied to any other school, it looked like he might just have to sign with the Braves after all. But he was offered the ability to retake entrance exams by Hosei University, a different Big Six school. There was intense speculation that Jose had let him in on a backroom deal because they were building a super team. Egawa joined alongside the man who'd beaten him in spring Koshin, Masaki Sakuda, as well as fellow top prospects Seiichi Uematsu and future two-time All-Star Hidetoshi Hakamada. With a rotation like that, you'd expect Jose to dominate. And they did. In his 4 years with Jose University, Egawa set a Big Six record by throwing 443 strikeouts. That would hold until 2002, when Tsuyoshi Wada threw 476. This was despite a stress fracture in his shoulder that he'd suffered as a sophomore, which allowed Meiji University to win both titles in 1975. All in all, Jose won half the tournaments played during Egawa's tenure, the fall of 1974, and a three-peat, taking both titles in 1976 and the spring title in 1977. They'd also won the fall title in 1977, but Egawa had graduated by then. In the 1977 draft, Egawa was once again a top prospect, and the Giants had lucked into the second overall pick in the lottery despite losing the Japan Series. Who'd they lose that Japan Series to again? Oh right, the Braves. Regardless, Egawa was so close to getting what he wanted. There was just one team in the way, the Fukuoka Crown Lighter Lions. The Lions were the joke of NPB. No money, no prospects, and a decimated fan base. They saw Egawa as the shot in the arm they needed, especially because their owners, the Fukuoka Baseball Company, were looking to sell. And the party that was showing the most interest was one of Japan's largest conglomerates, Seibu. But no one really knew that at the time. The FBC had kept negotiations from the public in order to not lose the fans they already had if it fell through. So, if the public didn't know, Egawa didn't know either. Not that he would have played for them anyways. Egawa had just turned down a budding dynasty in the Hankyu Braves. What the hell made them think he would choose to sign with them? On draft night, when the Lions took Egawa with the first overall pick, he was visibly upset, and he left the building. He would tell reporters that there was no way he would sign with the Lions. There were two reasons given. 1, Kyushu is too far away. 2, I don't like flying. That's true, by the way. Egawa had nearly fallen off a cliff as a kid and had a crippling fear of heights, to the point where even getting on a plane would make him nauseous. Ironic, given his girlfriend was a flight attendant. Still, he'd immediately make both these points mute by jetting off to LA. Since he had to wait till a week before the next year's draft to sign with another club, he jetted off to USC to study abroad and work with USC pitching coach Rod Dato. He would pitch in the Alaskan Summer League and would make an effort to learn English with the help of his roommate, future Yakult Swallow Chris Smith. When Seibu did finalize that deal to buy the Lions off the Fukuoka Baseball Company, they weren't shy about pursuing Egawa. Seibu was owned by Yoshiaki Tsutsumi, Japan's richest man. He had just announced that he was moving the team to Tokorozawa, Saitama for 1979. This was crucial because it was back in Kanto. Egawa stood to make a boatload of money if he signed, but the fact that the Lions played under the baby blue banner of the Pacific League was enough to disqualify them outright. It got so bad that Egawa's, for lack of a better term, handler tried to take out a restraining order against Seibu representatives who had kept calling Suguru to try and negotiate. While this was thrown out by an LA judge because, Seibu had a legitimate reason to try and contact Egawa, this would have large consequences. Since Egawa's handler was a board member of Mitsubishi of America, Seibu would cut all ties with Mitsubishi entirely. For those unaware, Mitsubishi doesn't just make cars. They make a lot of stuff. All those products would be taken off the shelves at Seibu Sogo department stores, and every Mitsubishi bus owned by Seibu Bus would be sold. Relations between the two corporate giants would only be restored after Tsutsumi stepped down from Seibu's board in 2004 after he was convicted for insider trading. But enough about business intrigue, back to Egawa. Since no one of Egawa's caliber had tried to pull what Egawa was pulling, this was technically still legal. But as soon as NPB realized what he was doing, the loophole was closed. But according to Egawa, he was never notified of this. So, 2 days before the 1978 draft, Egawa snuck back into Japan and was shuttled to Yomiuri's headquarters, where he signed with the Giants. The backlash was immediate. Seibu was naturally pissed, but so were the other 10 teams. This kind of BS is why the draft was instituted in the first place, to stop the Giants from snapping up any top prospect they wanted. So when the contract was presented to the NPB Commissioner's office to be ratified, NPB Commissioner Toshi Kaneko said he'd only ratify it if the other 11 teams voted to let him ratify it. Unsurprisingly, the other 11 teams voted unanimously against this. Egawa was now free to be taken in the 1978 draft, and by now, the NPB draft was back to running off a waiver system like it had in 1965, meaning that everyone had a shot of getting him. Yomiuri responded to this by boycotting the draft, arrogantly hoping that their lack of participation would get the whole thing invalidated. Teams were once again chomping at the bit to get Egawa, but not to have him, but to essentially hold him hostage and get whatever the Giants were willing to pay for him. Then again, there was always the chance that the Yakult Swallows or the newly moved Yokohama Taiyo Whales would select him, and Egawa would suck it up and sign with them. But neither of those teams did. Instead, Egawa was taken by the Nankai Hawks, the Lotte Orions, the Kintetsu Buffaloes, and the Hanshin Tigers. Of all the teams that could have won his rights, they went to the Tigers. So now, the Giants' biggest rival had them right where they wanted him. After being stonewalled by Egawa's team when they came to talk to him, the Tigers filed a complaint with the league office. Meanwhile, Yomiuri did as well, hoping to get the entire draft nullified. Egawa himself would present a case to the Japanese parliament, hoping to get the entire draft made illegal, trying to cite that it went against Japanese labor laws. That, didn't work. Not wanting this to get out of hand, NPB Commissioner Toshi Kaneko put his foot down. He ruled that Yomiuri's protest would be void, and Egawa's rights were property of the Hanshin Tigers. If the Giants wanted him, they had to negotiate a trade. The Tigers asked for Sadaharu Oh. This may seem weird at first. Sure, Sadaharu Oh is Sadaharu Oh, but he was 38 at this point. Well, they did it because in 1959 the Giants had stolen Oh out from under them. But again, story for another time. This was obviously an offer that was designed to be rejected, and eventually the Tigers secured a greater prize, Shigeru Kobayashi. Kobayashi had won the 1977 Eiji Sawamura Award and had been the ace of the Giants since they traded away Kazumi Takahashi in 1975. This offer was a lot more palatable, and the Giants accepted. This blindsided Kobayashi, who had just unpacked at Giants camp when he was shuffled off and essentially bullied into accepting the trade by Giants management. He was paid 30 million yen, which was the equivalent of $150,000 for meritorious service, and promised a job at the Yomiuri-owned Nippon Television when he retired. The latter never came, as NTV refused to honor the deal. Kobayashi would instead end up working for TBS, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Kobayashi tried to go back to Giants camp to get his stuff and say goodbye, but he was blocked by Giants management. They didn't want the departure of Kobayashi to hurt the morale of the team and give Egawa a negative perception in the locker room from day one. That didn't work, as the team would find out when Kobayashi held a press conference to announce the trade. Hanshin fans immediately got behind Kobayashi, as it was worried he might just retire. They treated him as their tragic hero, and took every opportunity to make sure he knew he was loved and valued by them. While Kobayashi and Egawa maintained a friendly demeanor around each other for the cameras, Kobayashi was still incredibly bitter about being forced out. In his last act as NPB commissioner, Toshi Kaneko suspended Egawa until June 1st, 1979 for attempting to circumvent the draft. The Giants would not challenge this move, and Kaneko stepped down. Thanks to this fiasco, the press, who 7 years earlier had branded him as the Monster, gave Egawa a new nickname, Dirty Egawa. Almost as if by fate, Suguru Egawa's first NPB game would come against none other than the Hanshin Tigers. 50,000 people would crowd into Korakuen Stadium to watch Japanese baseball's premier rivalry matchup. Egawa would go 8 innings, striking out 5. Mike Reinbach, Leroy Stanton, and Yoshiharu Wakana would give Egawa his "Welcome to the big leagues, kid" moment, with each of them taking him deep. The Giants would lose 5-4. Egawa's next start would prove that he was worth it, however. Facing the dominant Hiroshima Carp, he outdueled Hall of Famer Manabu Kitsubepu while shutting down the Carp's dominant hitting core, only allowing 1 unearned run in the process. It didn't hurt that John Shippen had given him an early lead with a 3-run jack. Egawa would continue to start at the front end of the Giants' rotation for the rest of 1979, as the Giants fell to 5th place in the CL, 10.5 games back of the pennant-winning Carp. While Egawa's 9-10 record was unimpressive on the surface, he still sported a solid 2.80 ERA and 3.95 FIP, good for a FIP minus of 88, and a nice ERA minus of 69. His 3.1 WAR in his rookie campaign was definitely a solid foundation to build on. Of course, thanks to the mess he'd caused, Egawa was never going to be voted for the Rookie of the Year, no matter how well he did. The award instead went to Dragons pitcher Kimiya Fujisawa, who not only posted a better record of 13-5 with a similar ERA, but advanced analytics would have shown he had stronger peripherals too, posting a lower FIP of 3.82 and 4 WAR. Granted, with the benefit of having 2 more months of playing time, but I digress. Oh, by the way, who ended up winning the Eiji Sawamura Award that year? Oh yeah, Shigeru Kobayashi, who put up the best season of his career, going 22-9 with a 2.89 ERA and a 3.54 FIP, putting up 6.7 WAR. Egawa would build on a solid 1979 season to ring in the new decade. In fact, he had the second highest WAR of any NPB pitcher in 1980, putting up 5.7 WAR and a 2.48 ERA, as his Giants languished in third place. The only pitcher who was better than him was PL Rookie of the Year Isamu Kida, who picked up an all-NPB pitching triple crown and put up a staggering 8.1 WAR. But at the time, the Eiji Sawamura Award was given out by Yomiuri and was limited to Central League players only, so it looked like Egawa would be a shoo-in for it. Nope, the Sawamura committee decided that no one deserved it that year. Yeah, that's the thing. Never mind that Egawa was leaps and bounds ahead of every other CL pitcher, he was just seen as so toxic that they didn't want to give it to him. Maybe they just felt that the sheer dominance of Kida meant that calling any Central League pitcher the best arm in Japan would be disingenuous. It wouldn't be until 1989 that the Eiji Sawamura Award would be expanded to PL pitchers. Kida would win PL MVP instead. So, Egawa strove to do whatever it took to get that award. 1981 would be the return of the monster. In 31 starts, Egawa went 20-6, tossing 7 complete game shutouts. He threw 221 strikeouts and put up an ERA of 2.28, winning an all-NPB pitching triple crown. While I won't say he nearly single-handedly dragged the Giants to the 1981 CL pennant, he was a huge part of it. Surely, this would be the season that removed the last iota of doubt that Suguru Egawa was deserving of the Eiji Sawamura Award. Nope, the committee of Tokyo sports journalists who voted on the award didn't give it to him. Okay, did they just not give it out again? No, they gave it to Giants number 2 starter Takashi Nishimoto. Now, was Nishimoto a good pitcher? Yes, quite good. He had the 5th highest WAR of any starter in NPB in 1981. Still, here's Nishimoto's stats, here's Egawa's. It's not even close. This is what real media bias looks like. After that, Yomiuri would completely restructure how voting for the Sawamura Award was conducted. Egawa would get the consolation prize and win CL MVP, as his Giants geared up to face off against their stadium mates, the Nippon Ham Fighters, in the Japan Series. Suguru Egawa, the ace of the Giants, would face off against Kazumi Takahashi, the former ace of the Giants, who they'd traded to the Fighters for Isao Harimoto. In the first inning, he'd face off against Tony Solaita, the Samoan slugger who still holds the Fighters' record for the most homers in a single season. He took Egawa deep. After pitching a clean second, 2 hits would put runners on second and third for Nobuhiro Takashiro, who'd drive 1 home on a sac fly. 2-0 Fighters. In the fourth, Junichi Kashiwabara clubbed a leadoff home run. 3-0 Fighters. Egawa would give up 2 more hits in the inning, but kept the Fighters from adding any more. That was until the 6th inning, when he gave up a leadoff double to Kashiwabara, who was later driven in by a single from Mitsuo Sugano. 4-0 Fighters. Egawa would finish the inning, but his first Japan Series start was not a memorable one. 6 innings pitched, allowing 4 runs, all earned, on 8 hits, including 2 home runs. While he didn't walk anyone, he only struck out 3. That is good for a James game score of 43 and a Tango game score of 39. Not ideal. Not that it's any consolation, but Takahashi didn't get the win either. He was knocked out in the 8th inning after the Giants put up 3 runs on him, only 1 of which was earned. Still, it didn't matter in the end. Hiroaki Inoue would walk off the game with a pinch hit single, and the Fighters would take Game 1 6-5. The Giants would take Game 2 2-1, then lose Game 3 3-2. Then Egawa was back on the mound for Game 4. This time it went much better. Egawa would pitch a complete game, giving up only 2 runs on 6 hits, striking out 6. One of those runs was a Junichi Kashiwabara homer, but other than that gaffe, he was solid. The Giants would take Fighters reliever Tomotaka Sugiyama behind the woodshed in the 7th and win 8-2. After winning Game 5 9-0, the Giants had the chance to close out their first Japan Series title since 1973. Yes, I know that's only 8 years, but to Giants fans that seemed like an eternity. Egawa once again pitched a complete game, but it was much shakier than Game 4. After going down early, the Fighters were playing for their lives. Hiroaki Inoue would finally break through with a solo shot in the 6th, and the fighters managed to get 2 in the 8th as well. But still, even after throwing 120 pitches, Giants manager Motoshi Fujita insisted on leaving Egawa out there. Egawa got Shinichi Igarashi to pop one into the infield, and the 1981 Japan series ended in Egawa's glove. Like it or not, agree with his methods or not, Egawa got exactly what he wanted. He even got a raise from 15.6 million yen, or $68,000, to 30 million yen, or a little over $150,000. But 1982 would be a step back. While Egawa was still good and led the CL in strikeouts, he was no longer the best pitcher in the Central League. Manabu Kitabepu led the CL in both wins and WAR, and was named to the CL Best 9. The ERA title ended up going to Akio Sato of the Yokohama Taiyo Whales? Yes, really, a man who started only one game all season. He still pitched over 134 innings, and thus was qualified for the ERA title. Yeah, I don't get it either. Regardless, Egawa led all CL starters with a 2.36 ERA. The Giants fought tooth and nail with the Chunichi Dragons for the 1982 pennant, but while the Giants finished their season on October 9th, the Dragons still had 8 more makeup games to play thanks to rainouts. They needed to win at least 5. On October 18th, they entered their final game of the season, needing to win to get the pennant. They thumped the Yokohama Taiyo Whales 8-0. This led to a lot of accusations that the Whales had just laid down for the Dragons to make sure the Giants didn't get the pennant. True or not, Egawa and the Giants would just have to make sure they weren't in a position to allow that to happen again in 1983. Egawa would be rewarded for this season with another raise, bumping his salary from 30 million yen to 44 million yen, which is about $191,000 a year, making him one of the highest paid Japanese players in the league. But in the 1982-83 offseason, Egawa's shoulder gave up the ghost. He kept this under wraps, even from team management. Only the doctors knew. He'd go through multiple rounds of acupuncture to try and ease the burden on his shoulder, and adopted more of a pitch-to-contact repertoire, aiming to keep his pitch counts as low as possible. He did not want to appear weak to a media apparatus that wanted nothing more than his downfall, so he didn't even inform manager Sadaharu Oh. Had he known, Oh likely would have yanked him from games earlier to help preserve his shoulder, and the media would eventually put 2 and 2 together. While the injury made Egawa the 5th best pitcher in the Central League that year, he still led the Giants in wins with 16, so pundits still called him the ace of the Giants. Egawa's new pitch-to-contact style was apparent, as his strikeout numbers took a massive hit. Egawa was even used as a high-leverage reliever on his off days, something that probably didn't help his shoulder. Regardless, he was the one to get the save when the Giants clinched the pennant. It was back to the Japan series. Guess who they'd be facing? That's right, the Seibu Lions. The team Egawa had scorned back in 1978 had transformed itself into a juggernaut virtually overnight, winning the PL by 17 games. The significance of this matchup was not lost on the Lions. Yoshiaki Satsumi wanted his squad to break Egawa and the Giants over their knee. In Game 1, Egawa would face their wrath. In the first inning he gave up a run, but it was unearned because the whole reason he'd gotten on base was an error from Reggie Smith. The second inning would destroy him. A leadoff single from Hiramichi Ishige was followed up by another from Masahiro Kuroda. They'd be advanced on a sac bunt from Lions starter Hirohisa Matsunuma, and both runners would score on a Hiroyuki Yamazaki double. Egawa would collect himself and get Yoshie Tachibana to ground out, but then he walked Steve Ontiveros for the second time in that game. In stepped Koichi Tabuchi, one of the best pure hitters in NPB history. He'd hit a scary fly ball to center in the first, but it had been hauled in. But this time he didn't miss. Tabuchi's 3-run shot would make it 6-0 Lions. Another hit from Takaji Ota would be for naught, as Egawa got Terry Whitfield to pop out to end the inning. And that would be his night over. 2 innings, 6 runs, 5 earned, 1 strikeout, 2 walks. Not good. It didn't help that the Lions won 6-3. Well, the Giants shut out the Lions in Game 2 and walked them off in Game 3. They had the series lead going into Game 4, Egawa's next start. 2 early Giants home runs would give Egawa a 3-run cushion, but he was noticeably shaky, probably because right before the Japan series, he'd injured his calf. Still, he struck out 2 in the first to strand the bases loaded and pitched a clean second. Then in the third, Hiromichi Ishige led off with a double. After a groundout advanced him to third, Steve Ontiveros would hit his second single of the day to drive him home. Whatever, it was still 3-1. Egawa struck out Takeshi Ota to end the threat and pitched a clean fourth. The fifth, 2 runs on 5 hits. Probably would have been more if the Giants hadn't nailed the Lions on some bad base running. Egawa would pitch 1 more inning, but would be lifted to avoid having to deal with the heart of the Lions' order again. The Lions would pounce on the Giants' bullpen in the 8th and 9th, and the game would end 7-4. But hey, Hector Cruz hit a 3-run shot in the bottom of the 9th to give the Giants the win in Game 5. Game 6, having tied the game in the 9th, Egawa was brought out as a high-leverage bullpen arm to try and keep it tied in the 10th. It didn't work. After Takeshi Ota and Terry Whitfield got on base with singles, Eiji Kanamori would hit a double to drive in both of them. We're going to Game 7. The Lions won Game 7 3-2 on a 7th inning bases-clearing double from Terry Whitfield. By championship win probability added, it is the most important hit in NPB history. In the offseason, longtime Giant Tsuneo Horiyuchi retired. Horiyuchi would offer his number, 18, the traditional number of ace pitchers in Japan, to Egawa, but he turned it down. Maybe he knew he wouldn't be able to live up to it anymore. 1984 would see Egawa regress further, with his ERA climbing to 3.48 and striking out only 112 batters. The Giants would end up finishing 3rd, behind the Carpin Dragons. Still, Egawa was a perennial all-star, because Giants, and he would pair up with Chunichi Dragons catcher Takayoshi Nakao to strike out 8 PL batters in a row in Game 3 of the All-Star Series, including the PL's best hitter, Hiromitsu Ochiai. This was 1 short of the record for consecutive strikeouts in an All-Star game. Still, the great defense behind him gave Egawa a 15-5 record, good for the highest winning percentage in the Central League. For those of you who care. He did manage 3 complete game shutouts though. But the shoulder injury came back for 1985, limiting Egawa's effectiveness, and the Giants remained stagnant in 3rd place. His ERA ballooned to 5.28, and many questioned if his career might be over. But something else happened that year. Randy Bass was coming into the last 2 games of the season with 54 home runs. The Giants did not want him to get his 55th. So before the first game, Tsuneo Horiyuchi gathered all the pitchers together and said the club would fine them 200,000 yen for every strike they threw to Bass. Egawa said, F right off with that, and pitched to Bass anyway, something Bass appreciated greatly. Bass praised Egawa as one of the best pitchers he'd ever faced, both in MLB and NPB. In 1986, fresh off recovering from another round of acupuncture, he pitched decently. The defense behind him and the bats in front of him meant that Egawa would finish the season with a respectable 16-6 record with an ERA of 2.69. Nice. While advanced metrics have since shown us that it wasn't as big of an improvement as people had hoped, the metrics the Giants had at the time told them their ace was back, and he was rewarded with another raise, this time to 63 million yen, or about $275,000. Oh yeah, and for the second time in 2 years, Randy Bass entered a game against Egawa, looking to tie a record that belonged to Sadaharu Oh. This time, it was the record for consecutive games with a home run. Egawa grooved him an absolute meatball. I choose to believe this was on purpose. At the end of the season, the Carp barely edged out the Giants for the Central League pennant. It wasn't really Egawa's fault, as in the end, a 3-2 loss to the Yakult Swallows in the second last game of the season was what doomed them. Still, by the end of the season, Egawa's shoulder may as well have been made out of Play-Doh. After undergoing another round of acupuncture to try and ease the pain, Egawa reportedly sat down with his wife and told her, if it didn't get better, he was done. The Giants had some good arms in Hiromi Makihara and Masumi Kuwata, who they'd taken in the first round of the 1985 draft. Although Kuwata's pick in the draft was just as controversial as Egawa's, as many teams felt that he'd misled them into thinking he'd withdrawn, there was nothing illegal about it. Kuwata was a media darling, in contrast to the often reviled Egawa. But 1987 would see a different kind of challenger. A new monster had joined the party, Bob Horner. The Yakult Swallows had taken advantage of the rampant collusion in MLB to pry away Horner. Usually only the Giants had been able to get such players, like Egawa's teammate Warren Cromartie. Given failed major leaguers Randy Bass and Greg Boomer Wells were in the process of having Hall of Fame careers in NPB, people thought Horner was going to be insane. And he was. But when Egawa faced him for the first time, he struck him out in all 3 plate appearances. He'd get a no decision as the Giants won 7-6, but this was Egawa's final triumphant moment. He just kept getting worse and worse. September 20th, he gave up 2 home runs to Hiroshima Carp first baseman Takehiko Kobayakawa. The second was a come-from-behind walk-off 2-run shot. Egawa collapsed on the mound, partially from the pain, partially from the shame. At that moment, he realized he was done. He couldn't keep going. But he couldn't stop just yet. The Giants had won the pennant, and they'd be taking on the Seibu Lions in the Japan series. Egawa would have to run the gauntlet against the team he'd scorned one last time. They did not forgive, and they did not forget. O would pencil in Egawa to start Game 3. At this point, the series was tied 1-1. The Giants had blown up Osamu Higashio in Game 1 to the tune of a 7-3 win, but had gotten shut out in Game 2 by Kimiyasu Kudo. In the first 4 innings, he looked like his old self again, allowing only 1 hit and inducing a lot of weak contact. O had ordered him to intentionally walk Hiromichi Ishige with a runner in scoring position, but other than that, Egawa was fine. After striking out the Lions' young phenom Kazuhiro Kiyohara for the second out, into the batter's box stepped George Vukovic. The unsung hero of the 1986 Japan series, having driven in the winning run in Game 8, Vukovic was a notoriously crafty hitter who often rose to the challenge in clutch situations. In this case, that meant putting a solo homer over Kurakuin's right field wall. 1-0 Lions. In the top of the 8th, Ishige would prove O had been right to be scared of him, as he clubbed a solo shot of his own to make it 2-0. Giants center fielder Kiyoshi Nakahata would drive in Warren Cromartie to get the Giants within 1, but they couldn't get anything more. Egawa left the game after the 8th, down 2-1, and that would be the final score. That would be the last time Suguru Egawa took the mound in anger. He would retire from playing baseball at just 32 years old. He finished with 8 innings pitched, giving up 2 runs on 4 hits, striking out 5. Meanwhile, his opponent Taiyuan Kuo went all 9 innings. The Giants would win Game 4, but would lose Game 5 and 6, and with them, the series. While Egawa was planning on retiring, the Giants, perhaps feeling sympathy for all they'd put him through, bought out his contract before he retired, giving him the rest of the money he was owed. He was also promised a job at Nippon Television, but unlike Shigeru Kobayashi, they'd actually honored it. Remember how I said Kobayashi had been hired by TBS as an analyst? Well, when the negotiations surrounding Egawa's retirement were occurring, someone in the Giants organization leaked it to TBS, and thus, Shigeru Kobayashi was the first to announce Egawa's retirement to the public. At the press conference where he officially announced his retirement, Egawa lamented his decision to get acupuncture instead of proper surgery, and told the attending journalist that he felt it had ended his career earlier. The Japanese Association of Acupuncture Practitioners was furious and demanded to know which of their number had been the one to administer the practice to Egawa. They feared that these statements would cause a good number of the public to shun the practice and put them out of business. Egawa would retract his statement and apologize. Egawa's retirement ceremony would be held at the brand new Tokyo Dome on March 18, 1988. In the 35 years since, despite some questionable financial decisions, Egawa has always been able to find steady work as a baseball analyst, even starting his own YouTube channel, which has amassed over 200,000 subscribers. Because he knows what it's like to be a target of the media, he's often seen as pretty lenient when it comes to criticizing players, almost never calling them out by name. And when he does criticize them, he tries to do so in a more constructive way, not wanting to seem like some cranky old man. In 2007, he and Shigeru Kobayashi would finally make amends on the set of a commercial they were shooting together. They would have sooner, but Egawa felt so guilty about being the reason Kobayashi was traded away that he made a point to try and avoid him. It's hard not to speculate just how Egawa's career would have gone had he not been so single-minded about playing for the Giants. If he'd signed with the Braves after getting drafted the first time, he'd have 3, possibly 4, or even more Japan Series titles to his name. Had he signed with the Lions, something that probably would have led to him actually getting surgery on his shoulder and extending his career, he could have had at least 8 Japan Series titles to his name, maybe even more. But all in all, I don't think he really cares. At the end of the day, he got what he wanted. He suited up for the Giants, and he won a Japan Series ring. Suguru Egawa rarely ever smiled. This was something instilled into him by his father as a young man. But on a brisk, late October day in 1981, as that pop-up landed in his glove, you'd struggle to find a happier man on the face of the earth. As always, a big shout out to my patrons, Juan Jose Sanchez Bracamontes, Alex Irish, The Frilled Shark, Julian Willie, Ryan Fox, Lucas Boria, G, Mentasmic, Tom Musa, The Baseball Brit, Eric Cooper, and Anthony Pang. And to everyone else, thank you so much for watching. I've been Gaijin Baseball. See ya.